I'm super excited and so grateful that you're here. I started this podcast so we could have some conversations that would hopefully help turn the messy into healing. If that idea sounds good to you, you must be a pathfinder too. Let's get started. Hi, this is Jill Castle. Welcome back to Talks Too Much, a podcast where we turn challenges into strengths, explore the real power behind choosing your own path, right? I'm your host, Jill Castle, and today we're going to dive into a topic that hits close to a lot of families that I've worked over the last 20 years with. As a lot of you know, I have the educational background. If you are new, I guess I got to run it down and just tell you that my academic background is in educational psychology and behavior. You have to change behavior to learn, so it kind of all works together. I have taught at the Teachers College at ASU for Mary Lou Fulton for probably about 10 years. And then I've worked nationally for about 20, helping people with IEPs and how to work with their kids and how to get 504s or any accommodations, and also regular families that are just really, really struggling because our system. And we're going to talk about that today. I've also worked with the Department of Education handling disputes. So those of you who have worked with me, I'm always about collaboration. I'm always anti-fight, fight, fight. I'm about bringing everybody together, just so you know. So I've got a really cool guest on. This is the second of our education series, and this is going to be creative solutions for creative kiddos that aren't fitting the norm. So Stephanie, I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for doing this. This is so weird. This whole podcast thing is just so strange. But I appreciate you being here. So introduce yourself and give your background.
Sure. My name is Stephanie. I am best known as Jill Castle's friend, but I'm also known in my parts as the CEO of our household. Before kids, I had a whole different life, and your family brought me into that life, which I am always grateful for. So when Anthony was doing social skills, that was my first introduction to the world of developmental challenges. And I got to be part of a pediatric multidisciplinary clinic where there were social skills, occupational therapy, speech therapy, music therapy, behavioral therapy, dance and movement therapy. Every therapy you could think about was all under one roof. And that sort of just led me into a whole world of learning about kids. Before this, I didn't even want to have kids. And I found it so fascinating to see and learn about child development and how malleable kids are and how you can encourage their development and grow it. It was kind of mind-blowing to me. So I had some amazing leadership at that clinic and I just soaked it in just like as much as I could. I ate it up. I wanted to know every piece of it. I had supervisors that were OTs and speech pathologists, and I would just sit with them and ask them for hours and hours, more information, read. And so anything I do, I tend to dive into pretty 150%. So that's what I did. And then from there, I went to work as a floor time therapist at Real Connections. And that was specifically with kids with any sort of developmental challenges, PDD and OS. Autism was mostly, what we were working with, but inside the home with the families and the children. And then while I was there, we were doing supervisory meetings, and I was introduced to the work of Dan Siegel, who is one of the leading, neuropsychologists in the world, parenting experts, etc. Was watching his videos on attachment theory, which was just like the lights went on for me. And it was sort of the spark that changed everything for me in terms of my path and my interest after that. So I emailed him and begged him to be a part of his world in any way, shape, or form. And he in those days answered my email and said, like, sure, do you want to transcribe my whole book on interpersonal neurobiology? And I was like, sure. So 8 hours of, a book, an audiobook, I had to type it out on a laptop for 3 weeks. And as a result, he let me join one of his study groups. And then I wiggled my way into a job with him, and I was Dan Siegel's right hand girl for a long time, putting him in
Mhm.
speaking engagements, studying under him, doing whatever I could to learn more from him. And that was just incredible. So, Dan Siegel, if people don't know, wrote Parenting from the Inside Out, Brainstorm, Interpersonal Neurobiology, so many different books.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, he had written a book with Tina Payne Bryson, who is also now known as a huge parenting expert across the world. And she and Dan wrote Whole Brain Child. And so then she started her own multidisciplinary clinic. And I went to go work for her and her husband as they were opening up that clinic. And right around, I don't know, maybe after the first year is when I had my second kiddo. And he was not like the first. So I could, after
They rarely are.
after a little while, I could no longer juggle both at the same time and felt like I needed to concentrate all my time at home. And since then, I have just been mom, CEO of household, and advocate full time for my children.
And you do it so well, I gotta tell you. I mean, honest to God, I think this is a different conversation, but I just have to say, when they said, when women started going into the workforce and saying we could work and we deserve the right to choose, I think there's been a big misunderstanding, and somehow that got translated into we should do it all. Or worse yet, you can do that, but you still have to do this. Like, don't forget, you still have to take care of your home and your children,
Yeah.
and you go out and have a career, maybe for yourself, maybe just to make money, maybe both, but make sure you're doing your other job.
Right,
And
and on
it's
top of
great.
that, there won't be any consequences, like, there's no downstream effect to that. Everything will be fine. You'll figure it
I
out.
know, and it's just this unrealistic expectation, and the word. So in my world with disabilities, the families that I work with, kiddos with disabilities, now you're just taking that to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
And those of us who continue to work, I always had to have 5 jobs. I couldn't find like one employer that would make my work life be able to work for my home life, right? So
Oh,
I always
sure.
had to have 5 jobs going on so that I could have flexibility. So that's for the women that are able to work. I was lucky that I don't know, that's the tenacity that you and I clearly have in common in our friendship because I was very tenacious.
Yeah.
And I was mostly a single mom too, so I had to really figure it out, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But I look at I work with so many families that the mom can't work. I mean, because not only that responsibility, of course, trying to do it well, but now they've also got a kiddo that, is really challenging. So the
yeah,
youngers, the littles, they have trouble even leaving to go work. And then once they get them into school, you would think, oh, okay, I got a little bit of time to do something. But in our school system, which is what we were supposed to be talking about today, I could go
yeah,
on and on with you about so many topics. You're going to probably have to come back. But today's topic is that, like, what if your kid doesn't fit in the educational mold? Now, when I work with parents that have kiddos with disabilities, they tend to have these different options, right? And they have public school, they have private school, and then they have charter schools or homeschool.
yeah,
Okay. Those are where we usually have our discussions.
yeah,
A lot of parents are very attracted to charter schools, especially this day and age with all the ESA funding that we give. Okay. And they think because there's a smaller ratio that they're
mhm,
going to be better for their kids with disabilities.
mhm,
Now, please don't take it like I'm bagging on charters. I'm not necessarily. I'm sure there's some good charters out there.
yeah,
I just don't know a lot of them.
yeah,
And in my experience for the State Department, I would have to go every year and teach charters about special ed and the laws that they had to follow if kids had disabilities. And because they receive some public funding, they have to follow those laws,
Yeah.
but they weren't equipped to. They weren't educated. They'd get a 4-hour education from me
Right.
once a
Right.
year,
Right.
and that's it, and then they couldn't afford staffing to do that, and they couldn't afford the services, so they were tasked with providing all that. I'm sure they wanted to. I don't think anybody sets out to be in
For sure.
education because they don't love kids, but
Yeah.
there's just no way that they could provide that, and then every year when I do the trainings, at least 50% of the charters would be closed, and there'd be 50% new charters
Right.
every year.
Right.
So I never was like a big fan of sending my families that were struggling to a charter, because now you're moving the kid bop and bop and bop, trying to find a charter that gets it. They'll all say that they get it, and then when you
Right.
get in there, they're like, "Oh, we can't handle this."
Right.
And then not that anybody has these bad intentions, but they're so forced to meet the state standards with testing. Those
Yeah.
kids put the scores down quite a bit, because unfortunately in this country we still make them test even though
Right.
they shouldn't be tested that way, right?
Right. And
So
also
so
because the charter school, you do have all the neurotypical kids and parents who have sent their kids there in the hope of getting some sort of specialized, right, or niche or some different education that they would at a public school. So they do expect a little bit more, even though it's still, a public school. And so when there are kids who need a lot of help in the class and you don't have aides that are well trained and know how to integrate that very well, that child does tend to pull a lot of resources and time
right,
and
right,
focus. And then the parents, even though it's public school, are like, wait a minute, this doesn't seem as fair. We want to be really supportive, but at the same time, this isn't working out for my kid. We were
right,
supposed to be getting a different education here. And so
right, exactly.
really tangly.
Exactly. And just to review, private schools can be great if you find the right one, but keep in mind, because they don't receive public funding, they really aren't mandated. I have
Mhm.
parents all the time come and go, "Well, my private school made an IEP." And I have to explain, "Yeah, they just did that out of courtesy." I mean, there's nothing to it. It's not
Right,
like
right.
they can
No,
go take
they
it
don't
and
have to.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying some of those aren't great as well, but
Mhm.
we aren't talking about the one-offs on this program today. We're talking about very
Yeah,
general
yeah,
speaking,
generalized.
very
Mhm.
generalized. So
Uh-huh.
I'm usually leaning towards sending them to their public school district, because they're, even in the rural areas, going to be the most equipped, that are
Yeah.
going to have the most training, the most teeth in the game, or whatever.
Yeah, there's definitely a structure. They know how to follow it all. It's pretty like, turn and burn. Like, I mean, they know what to do.
Yeah, and not saying that they're all doing a good job. And I always have parents ask this question too, like, "Well, I have a kid with a disability. We're going to move. Where should we go? What's the best school district?"
Right.
Okay, though that is such a misnomer. I got to say it's such a misnomer, because it really is about your team and your
Yeah.
collaboration. You
Yeah.
can have a really bad school district and have like 3 people on your team and have the best educational experience you could possibly imagine. You
Yeah.
could be in the best school district and have kind of that one teacher that probably should have retired, or that one group of people that feel threatened by how much and so
Yes.
the ego's in the way, or some
Yep.
of the other issues that we have. So I don't think there's a perfect solution. I always try to coach people on the fact that it is very relationship orientated. I
Yeah.
mean, you have to build a team.
You do.
I told you in the prep for this call, it's going to be frustrating for parents to hear some of this stuff today,
Yeah.
because it might sound like we're giving you more work, and that's not fair. And
Right.
it's not fair. And I was so frustrated and had a lot of resentments over the years, because
Yeah.
felt like I had to do everything. And,
Yeah.
you know, um, I didn't. I had a lot of support. I did. I had a lot of support. I just didn't know how to find it and
Yeah.
organize it,
Yeah.
because I was in grief, or I was in
Yeah.
panic or fight or flight, or half
Yeah.
the unhealthy states I was in a lot of the times, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
was mad, and I just wanted everybody to help me. So
Yeah.
we'll keep out of the fact that we've got a time in now that a lot of cuts are coming down the pipeline. So we are not in a state where public education is going to probably be at its finest right now.
No.
And so What I wanted to talk with you today, what I find you to be really exceptional in and kind of an expert, in my opinion, because I was really blown away when you did start having challenges with both your kids because your daughter is really exceptionally bright. And so that we have a lot of different types of challenges, right?
Yeah.
And when I saw you start having those, it was hard as your friend being in the school thing because, like, we're too close for like me to be giving advice, and you have to figure that out for yourself. And
Mhm.
actually, I learned so much from you
Mhm.
because I used to not recommend homeschooling for
Mhm.
parents, mostly in my world, because it was unhealthy a lot of times because
Yeah.
a lot of times our parents are in a grief state or a trauma state.
Yeah.
They are not helping themselves. They are not taking care of themselves. Rightly so. I am
Right.
not I was one of them, right?
Yeah.
I could never have done that. It wouldn't have been healthy for my kids for me to ever do that
Yeah.
because I was not healthy enough to do that properly. So,
Mhm.
what I really loved about what you learned was learning about the community and how to work together. And
Mhm.
I think I'm just going to say this and shut up and let you go, but I think given the isolation between social media and politics and the things that are happening and the rise of people recognizing disabilities or different learning styles, I don't know that we
Mhm.
really have more, but the recognition of it is really
Yeah.
high, right? Maybe we have more. We definitely have more anxiety. That I know for sure. That manifests in education for sure,
Yeah. Yeah.
and learning. So I was really fascinated, and I think what our future is really going to hold is almost to go back to reaching out to community, reaching out for help, not isolating.
Yeah.
Like I think that's where we're going to have to start going, or it's not going to be good. So
Yeah.
anyway, I also tell my parents when they get those diagnoses, yes, of course it's devastating and there's a whole bag of things that go with that. But it's also freedom. It's
Mhm.
freedom that you don't have to do it like everybody else is doing it.
Mm-mm.
You no longer, you get the hall pass
Mhm.
and you can do whatever the hell you want. You want to
Yes.
throw your kids in an RV and teach them in an RV while you travel the country,
Yep.
then you can do that if you have the right supports for the disability, right? Obviously.
Absolutely.
But I'm just saying you don't have to follow your neighbors and get them on the same soccer teams or get them on the same programs that everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
And I think we get stuck in that
Yeah.
and we're fighting the acceptance of what is.
Mm.
And we
Mhm.
wish it wasn't that way, and we
Mhm.
want our kids to just be like everybody else so we can just
Mhm.
breathe and know they're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
So let's hear about why, traditional systems didn't work for your kids and, what creative solution you came up with.
Yeah. Um, I sort of had a feeling that traditional school wouldn't work for my kids, but I wanted to give it a try. I just sort of had a gut feeling, but at the same time, I had no idea what else I would do. Um, and so, we tried it for a while. Zoe tried it, but she went kindergarten through by second grade is when she started having headaches and stomach aches and wasn't playing on the playground, was sort of like laying down after lunchtime and like walking the perimeter but not engaging with other kids, and she's a super social kid, and so we knew something was going on. And when we drilled down to it and found out that it was anxiety, um I mean, what she said to me was, "Mom, I can feel all the feelings in the room at all the time." And so she's just a very empathic kid, and she just felt everything and felt like she needed to control all of it in some way, The sadness, the anger, the confusion, she felt it all, and she didn't know what to do with all of it. She couldn't separate herself from everything else that was happening, and it was taking a toll on her. And I advocated for her and got her um, in a 504, also because we found out that she had a math learning disability. So that's pretty bad. So I definitely got her into a 504 immediately, but was very cautious, and watched her very closely just to see, how it would evolve. And we had an incredible team, like from the beginning. And um, we ended up moving her to a different school in the middle of that. And I was really lucky to find at the other school that we went to, and it was a total coincidence. Her teacher was an old friend of mine who was a yoga teacher. So, like, she could not have had a more supportive teacher who like would help her ground her body and pretend that she was a tree, so that she could feel grounded in the earth. She would let her go on walks. I mean, you know
That's
I
amazing.
mean, she had incredible support, and she still was like having panic attacks. And I was like, this is not going to work. We No 7-year-old needs to be going through this. Like, life is just not that big of a deal to put my kid through that, so that they can learn their ABCs. I'm sorry. So
I love that you were brave enough to do that.
yeah,
That takes courage
thank you.
because and self-confidence too, because it's so easy to go, "Oh, I'm gonna screw my kid up," you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I just thought nothing was worth that sort of mental anguish for a 7-year-old. So I pulled her out, and my younger kiddo was starting kindergarten at the time. And the first day I walked into the classroom with him, I was like, oh no, he's not going to do well here. Just he's he's going to run this classroom, or he's going to be the bad kid instantly. He's got way too much energy. He's so bright. He's doing puzzles upside down, 150-piece puzzles. Like, these kids are just sticking the things in. I'm like, this is not going to work, and so I just pulled them out both together and was like, well, I guess I'll just figure it out, and I had no idea what to do. And there was a lot of stumbling in the beginning. And but the first thing I did is I went online. And I know Facebook groups are still big, but Facebook groups were even felt like even bigger at the time. And I instantly just went on there and just started asking joining as many groups as I can, homeschooling groups, and like, what do you do? And blah, blah, blah. And how do you do this? And how do you choose curriculum? And all of that kind of stuff. And there was just so much support, and obviously these moms had been doing it for a long time, but there were always new people, and they were just so supportive with so many different resources, and sort of set me on a path. And they had meetup groups and co-ops and play dates. And it just really opened my eyes. I had a very narrow vision of what homeschooling looked like. And what I've learned is that it's like really unlimited. It's truly unlimited. Like, I have a friend who is living on a boat for 2 years with her family, and they are traveling around the world on this catamaran, and they're world schooling. That's what they do. I have another friend who just her kids go in regular school for a couple years, and then they pull them out and they go to Italy for a year and go to an international school there, or they went to a world school in Bali. They just do different things, and so it was a little overwhelming to think like, wow, I really could do anything. But it also just gave so
Mhm.
much freedom to be like, I get to choose what this looks like, for my kids. And I get to tailor it to them. Like, I don't have to fit any mold. I don't have to teach to any score, to any curriculum, to any state standard, And so, like, I get to really empower them to choose what they want. And so we've gone through various different things, but now we're sort of in a hybrid situation where we have been for the past couple of years, where we get funding through a charter school, and they go to an actual school building, and they have certified licensed teachers who teach core academic classes and extracurricular classes. And you have the ability to either choose those classes or not. So you can go to school there if you want, or you can do home study, or you can do a combination of both. You have an educational specialist that's assigned to you that you meet with for an hour a week, and they are the bureaucracy. They make sure that you're on par to reach whatever state standards that you have to, because you are getting funding from the state. So this is where there are some state standards that you have to meet. They make sure that your kids know how to email a teacher, that your kids know how to follow, their grades online if the teacher is giving grades. So, there's just so much flexibility.
So, first of all, that's amazing, but you're in Portland, and
Yeah,
that's a really progressive area.
it is.
So you could find something like that. But tell me a little bit more about what you did before that, because I thought I remembered, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought you had a group and like each parent took a day and took what
Oh,
they were good at. Like you just created something.
mm,
And that I think is a better solution for some people that aren't somewhere progressive or don't have the ability or the wherewithal to do all the teaching.
yes.
Like maybe, and I have those questions for you later about mental health and stuff like that of you.
Yeah, yeah.
But so tell me a little bit about how you did
Well,
that first.
I didn't specifically do that. I did something. I hired someone when the kids were much younger that was doing sort of like a preschool type program where I had different parents bring the kids to my house, and we collectively had someone who was helping at my
Oh,
house.
okay. Did all the parents like chip in?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, that's an
Yeah,
option because I was gonna say, what if everybody doesn't have money to travel around the world or to, you
exactly.
know what I mean? Like that sounds
Most
fabulous.
people don't. It sounds amazing, but most
Right,
people don't.
right.
Yeah. So that's an option. And I know some people did that over COVID as well, where they hired people to come and teach their kids at their house, like outside, with a little pod. People had pods. And so you can do a similar thing like that where you have a pod of people. You can either hire someone, or a lot of people, when we were living in Los Angeles, did do that. And they rotated, and that's kind of what you call a co-op, in
Okay.
homeschooling. And sometimes those can be more formal, where they like meet at a location and they have a
Like
room.
science at the science center?
No, like some of them like will rent out a room like at a church or
Oh, I
something,
see.
and so they can have sort of like a little school there in a way, and they all meet there and they do different projects throughout the day. I have heard of people doing rotating houses, and like there's a parent who's really great at science, there's a parent that's really great at history. You have 4 or 5 kids, and they go to these different houses, they do science projects together, they get the social interaction from their peers. They have a peer group that they continue to follow with. So that's one way of doing it. There's also there's micro schools that you can have multiple ages, from really young all the way, depending on how you want to do it. But some people do like K through fifth, and you might only have like 10 kids or something, but you have someone who's teaching that whole group, and they find ways of being able to personalize the education but also bring them together. And there's a lot of benefit from multi-age learning, a lot of benefit to be able to see how different ages, the older helping the littles, and the littles being able to aspire to the bigs, and
Yeah.
they get really excited and they want to learn more. It's sort of like having an older sibling. You want to know just as much as your older sibling, and so you're just gobbling up information. So there's a lot of motivation that comes from those kinds of schools.
I like that too. Just before I forget this thought,
Yeah,
what I like about that is that in our world with disabilities too, a lot of pressure goes on the siblings.
yeah,
And
I would
so what I
imagine.
like about that is if they had somewhere to go to where they like I always tried to bring in other older people or
Yeah,
younger people for Anthony to have in his life so all the pressure wasn't on Oliver.
yeah,
So he had different kind of, maybe different experiences rather than just putting all the pressure on the
yeah.
family.
I do
Um,
have to say also that the homeschooling community is one of the most inclusive communities I've ever experienced before. You do get a lot of neurodivergence in the homeschooling
I
community,
bet.
but what is incredible is that even at their school where there's a physical school building, I'm there so much and I see the range of different kinds of kids. And I mean, there's not even a blink with the kids. Like it doesn't even
They
phase
don't
them.
care.
It's not even known as something different. It's just
Mhm.
what is. And they don't treat them any differently. There's not the, you're weird or what's wrong with you. There's none of that. It's just so amazing to see kids like
No,
it
kids are.
not even register on their face that someone has a stutter or whatever it is. It's really beautiful.
Or a
Or
wheelchair.
wheelchair.
Yeah, in
Yeah,
our case.
yeah,
The other thing is that, like, when I would hear homeschooling, because I got to tell you, boy, do I have, we all have regrets, and I've
right,
made peace with most of them, right? Because I did the best I could with what I knew at the
of course.
time. But if I could go back, I would
Yeah.
have definitely gone more that route, especially with Oliver, because I was so busy paying
Mm,
attention to
yeah,
Anthony because he had muscular dystrophy and autism, and that was so obvious.
yeah,
I didn't realize Oliver had my ADHD, which
right,
is even harder
right,
because Anthony got the IEP. He got all the benefits
yeah,
to that. We could basically make his curriculum in
right,
school. I basically helped create it.
right,
But Oliver was stuck in the norm, and that's the biggest regrets I have is not
right,
just letting go and just
right.
doing something different. I think actually the best he ever did was he had something really terrible happen to one of his best friends in high school. That's another story. But so I pulled him so he could get some counseling and some therapy while he finished up that year, and he went online, and all of a sudden his grades were great, and he
Yeah,
had never had good grades,
yeah,
and he wasn't anxious, and he
yeah,
was starting to get well. And
yeah,
the thing about ADHDers, we are amazing academically
right.
when we find what we love.
Yes,
So
yes,
when we find our passion, we are
yes,
off the charts,
right,
obviously, right?
right.
I was a C student at best, and then all of a sudden I get into behavior and psychology and all this stuff. And I had one of the highest grades in the class. So, and same with Oliver now, he's going into paramedicine and possibly PA, physician's assistant school. And this was a kid that,
Yeah,
could get through a regular class. So
yeah,
what's cool about these ideas is that, you can make these projects and these things. You can take just the state standard, but you can create an entire project that they're excited about in a domain that they love and feel passionate about, and still align it to that state standard and get it done, right?
yes, yeah. And I have to say that uh, state standards are quite loose and vague. So people think that there are very strict standards.
Mm-mm.
K through 8, I mean, honestly, they're not. They're not. So there's a lot of wiggle room and creativity to meet a standard, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's some things like math, I mean, obviously your kids are going to have to know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. There's not a lot of wiggle room with that, but there's wiggle room in how you get there, and especially with homeschooling, it doesn't have to be linear. So you have a lot of time to meet all those standards. You don't have to meet all the standards that year and then all the standards layered next year and next year and next year. You can
Yeah.
have holes
Yeah.
wherever holes need to be, and you can shore up those holes over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no detriment to the kid isn't gonna, there's no failing in homeschooling. Your kid's not gonna
Yeah.
fail.
And let me know, talk to me too. This sparks a great conversation about development, because I know, especially with our kiddos go through so much, so we're putting some of them in clinical trials. You know,
Yeah.
kids, from what I know from my work, they don't develop in all the areas at the same time, right? So
No.
they can't, because they don't have the capacity. So if one year they're developing in their social skills, their academics might suffer. Or one year they're really developing in their academics, their emotional life might really be challenged. So
Yeah.
it is nonlinear, right?
Right.
And so what I love about this is that you can focus when you see that area that's really yearning to grow. You
Mhm.
can focus on that and know that it's going to be okay. We'll catch up on the math later, or we'll,
Yeah.
right now he needs to learn social skills because he can't talk to anyone.
That's
Like,
right.
that's more important, and it is more important, really,
It
in
is more
life. It
important.
is way more important because
It
we
is way
forgot
more
that later.
important, and it's
Yeah.
gonna become even more important. It's going to become the set of skills that you will need. The World Economic Forum just released their it was a little while ago, maybe a couple months ago, but their, projected vision of jobs by 2030. And everything will have flipped. And so we are looking at, and this goes for everybody. You are The jobs that required core academic skills are just not going to be the coveted jobs. And I know that's really long term, but I say that as to relieve parents of the burden
Sure.
that you are in some sort of race for something, because we are no longer training our kids to produce in a job, right? They are going to, yes, we want them to have a job and be able to survive, but the skills needed to get there are not going to be the skills that you and I were raised with, and the traditional way of thinking
Yeah.
about how to get to those jobs. And so our traditional model of school is breaking apart at the seams and is going to be continued to expose how weak it is over time, which makes this idea even more powerful because you can decide what those skills are for your kids.
Yeah, yeah, and play to their strengths.
Play to their
Because
strength
the one thing I've always been bothered by, school tries to make everybody equal at everything, and we're
all
not,
the
and
time.
nobody is, and
No
that's
one
not
is
even how
ever.
you find your job. That's not even how you get do your job. You do
No.
your job because you're excellent at one thing, and you have that to add to, so that's always bothered me too when we would do transition plans for kiddos with disabilities for leaving high school.
Yeah.
It'd always be like, let's start what they're passionate about. And,
Right.
I'd have kids with Duchenne that were like, well, I'm passionate about football. And the parent would be like, well, this is really helpful. He can't play football. But wait a minute. There
Yeah.
are so many spots in that world, you know what I
Mhm.
mean, that we could look at. Like,
Yeah.
there's 100 things around football that he
Yeah.
might be able to do. So
Yeah.
it's really that creativity. So really, I think the root of this issue is parents' exhaustion
Mhm.
and capacity.
Mhm.
I mean, and we got to be real about that because you are more tenacious than a lot of parents.
Mhm.
I find myself, I was more determined, and that's why I advocated for others because there were so many that
Yeah.
wanted that, but they were exhausted and they couldn't do that. And I get it. I'm just
Right.
like a little psycho, so I was able to pull it off. But so what do we say to those parents that like this just sounds exhausting? Like how do
Mhm.
I want to let them like just in behavior when I do behavior training. I teach them how to modify a behavior. And they
Mhm.
go, "Oh my God, that's going to take forever. That's so exhausting. I've got to be so strict in that beginning part, right?" And I go, "Well, okay, we've got that workload up front,
Yeah.
or you've got this going on and on and on for a few years,
Forever.
and
Yeah.
then that's really going to be exhausting."
Mhm.
So it's a little bit of tired up front.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that. Talk to me and what in the world made you think that like how do you manage your mental wellness when you're trying to do this with your kids? Like
Yeah.
what about you? So talk to me about how a parent would
Well, I think the
fathom
front
that,
yeah, I think the front loading is part of it, but I mean, stepping aside from all of that, I think for me, I am always trying to step back at first and see the bigger picture, right? For my kids.
Mm,
Regardless of whether your kid is neurotypical or neurodivergent, what do you see for your kid, right? In terms of their happiness for long term, for their success in life, right?
fulfillment.
For their fulfillment. What does it look like for them? Not what it looks like for you. What do you think it looks like for them? Right? So, like, Zoe has a math learning disability. Okay, I know that she's probably not going to ever be in a profession where she wants to use math all the time. She's not going to be an engineer. That's never been a strength. It's not a remote interest for her. I know that that's not what she's going to be doing. So, like, I'm not going to drill in my head and certainly bring it forth to her that she has to be on par or catch up or be at a certain level to be able to pass some
Math.
random standard.
Hmm.
That is not important to me, nor should it be important to her. Where would I rather her spend her time and her energy? On the things that are important to her. She loves creative writing. Great. That's where we're going to spend more of our time, right? So it's really stepping back and looking at what do you want for that child in particular. And Zoe and Owen are very, very different in what they're good at and what they enjoy. And so, like, I think the pressure on a parent to like be what all the other peers are being and doing what everyone is doing is it's heavy. It's really, really heavy. And I can imagine in the neurodivergent space, it becomes even more so because you're already starting lower than everybody else. And
Hmm.
so there's nothing but the feeling of I need to catch them up. I need to catch them up.
Right, right. I see that all the time. And my concern with that is that we extinguish their light
Right.
by doing that because like, especially with kids on the spectrum, everyone thinks that they're less than. Or
Mhm.
we don't think that, but I mean like
Yeah.
society is like, "Oh, that poor kid, that poor
Right.
parent." I have learned it is really quite possible that they are actually like
They
they have a communication issue,
yeah.
but they are
Yeah.
like they have skills that I think a lot of us don't have. And I think
Absolutely.
and so when you flip how you see that, you're like,
Yes.
"Ooh." So
Right.
maybe different isn't bad. Maybe it's
Right.
special. Not special like this hokey, my
Yeah.
kid's special because
Right.
no, I mean truly. Like
Right.
really like, what are they going to add to the world? So I
Yeah.
guess I just, I want to understand too. I mean, because some of this is going to bleed into all of my conversations. This is the thing about the podcast. I swear, all of my conversations Un they all lead back to us parents being well,
Right.
like us healing so our kids can heal or so our kids can thrive.
Right.
So again, that's what this is gonna come back to because,
Right.
because if you're exhausted and you want to send them off to school because you don't think you have the capacity to design all these things for your kid, even though they're struggling so bad and they're miserable, and you've got an inkling, you've got an interest in it, but you just don't think you can do it because it's not for everybody.
Mhm.
But you send them off to school and then you spend 20 hours a week arguing with the school, following up, writing letters, doing behavior charts, like and now you feel like you're a burden and you feel like there's something wrong with your kid. I mean, I do propose that that work is just as much work as it would take to step out of the box and do something creative. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, I would like to argue that it would be even less, because of all the emotional turmoil that you're having to experience between being misunderstood by everybody else when you know your kid deeply and having to gaslight yourself all the time about whether you're actually correct and whether you're really doing the right thing. Because at the end of the day, like, what is it all for? Right? Like, what is it all for? Like, how important is it for them to know the things that we say they need to know, right? And that conversation is going to morph even more so rapidly in the next 5 years with AI. But how much do they really need to know? They really don't need to know that much, to be honest, when it comes to like core academic stuff. It's very, very little. People don't realize how waste of a time school can be. There's so much time that is not used because there's so much happening and a teacher has to control so much and you have to get in lines and you have to go outside and everyone has to go, people have to go to the bathroom and then you have to coordinate a group to do this over here and then that group's doing something over there, and there's a lot of time that is missed, right? That doesn't have to, you don't have to incorporate that at home. You can have 2
Yeah.
hours of academics at the most, and the rest of the day can be focused on the child doing the things that the child loves to
And
do.
they're learning. The
Of
kids, young
course.
kids, they're teaching in this country, as we know. We could go on about this too, but
Yeah,
other countries have higher literacy rates and they don't even start reading till third grade.
right.
And there's other and the countries with the highest academic records don't do homework,
Right.
and have 4-day school weeks
Right.
and really have summer vacations,
Yeah.
actually taking vacation.
Yeah.
We don't do that in this country because everybody's got to work. So
Yeah.
they need their kids in something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, our I think our education system is failing, and I love everybody that wants to be in it. I did too, but I think, we're doing a disservice by not just l- like let's redesign it. All the energy that we have going in this country to that, and that's another I'm doing another episode on where we're at in this country with education, but so that's
Yeah.
a little inkling on the next podcast. But yeah, so so I love this. I love this, and I think you've done an amazing job, and your kids are, doing really well, and the other people that you work with in homeschooling, are they, happier? Do they have more fun? Do they have more joy in their life?
I mean, I think they have a lot of joy and flexibility. And the other thing is the connection stays really strong. And so for me, like my relationship with my kids is is so strong. Like it's so different. I notice how different it is. And I think a lot of that has to do with, not only just the amount of time, but the quality of time that we do get to be together. But yet, they're not with me all the time. They have lots of activities outside of when they're doing their core academics, and they get to just hang out. They get to be bored. They get to focus on the things that are really important to them. But I get to hear and then comment, because I'm part of everything that they're doing, And so we're in constant touch in terms of connection, right? At all times. And that really makes a difference. People comment all the time about how grounded and confident my kids are and how connected they are to us and how incredible they are with other people, like being able to talk and relate to other people because they have that practice all the time. They're with
Mhm.
so many different ages of people all the time. And so they're not just comparing themselves to their peers all the time. They are interacting
Yeah, that's a
with
big
a
one. That's really
whole
hard.
range of other people. Um, but yeah, self-care for me requires having structure. I have to have structure. And my kids know that, like, during this time is when mom is working out, and then when I'm working out, they're doing X, Y, and Z, and so there's a flow and a rhythm that has to be established. Um, and
Well, that's when the
I
behavior
had,
is always the worst. I'm
huh?
sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's when the behavior is always the worst. Like parents, I was just my next question to you was, but a lot of parents that I'm working with have behavioral challenges with their kids. So
Yeah,
yes, they love the idea of pulling them out because they don't have to deal with everybody being upset with their kids' behavior, but now they got to deal with their kids' behavior. And
yeah,
how do they get their kids to comply to this? Because we're not talking about kids that are typical, they're oppositional,
yeah,
and then the parents have a whole bunch of issues that are going on that are making it really hard to have the capacity to do this well.
yeah,
And so I guess what you just referred to, having structure when the worst times, oh well, even in school when I would go in to solve behavior issues for teachers, it was always at recess, lunch, I mean, it was the times where there wasn't structure put in place are the worst usually.
right,
So like summer vacation for parents.
right, right.
I with having a kid on the spectrum and another ADDer, and I could never afford the summer camps, right?
Yeah,
So for me, I had to have the day structured. So it
yeah,
was fun. It was summer. It wasn't like I was, they were in drills all the time or something. But it was like, okay, this time we're going to go swimming. And then this time's going to be quiet time for you guys to watch a movie. And then this time we're going to cook together and make dinner or whatever. I had to
yeah,
do that. I
yeah.
hated doing it because I'm an ADDer and I don't like putting the structure in place.
I
But I
know.
got to have it too, or I don't do well.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
so I
I
love
mean, I
the
feel like
concept.
that's where AI has been transformative for us, to be able to put all of that information in and be able to have something spit out instantly, a structure, and for me to be able to modify it to my kids' own personalized, interests, so that there's a buy-in. I've even brainstormed with Owen when we were arguing over something. We've each put in our perspective into AI, into ChatGPT, and said, help us work this out. Like, what is a middle resolution? What are some ideas about how we can resolve? He wants to do X, Y, and Z, and I want him to do, P, R, and Q. And like, we're having a hard time figuring out how this is going to work for both of us, and
And
so
then what happened? So I know a lot of people are new to Chat GPT. I'm learning it's all about prompt engineering, right? It's all about how I ask the questions and the information I give it. And
yeah,
it's been an amazing tool that I'm just now learning.
yeah.
But like, so what did it spit out? Like, can you give the scenario? Give an example of what you guys were, do you remember what you were arguing over and how
I,
it
I
felt?
don't remember what we were. I think it was about. I'm pretty sure it was about video game time because that is his
It's a
thing.
big deal,
It's a
right?
big
Yeah.
deal, and something that's very difficult because of that in our household is that you can't just call it screen time anymore because everything is screen time. What kind of screen time should we be having right now? And what's considered creative screen time, and what's educational screen time, and what is fun screen time? What is social screen time, where collaborating with my friends and we're like, having cool
Right.
conversations
Which is
while we're
positive.
working, which
Yeah.
we're working on something together, versus me scrolling. So like, you can't just call it screen time anymore. So we were having an argument over screen time, and I was putting in what I thought I wanted him to do, and he was putting in what he wanted to do. But because he was able to contribute to it, he had an automatic buy in. And
Hmm.
so the proposals that were coming out, we were able to say, like, well, okay, that's actually a good point I hadn't thought about. Chat GPT, thank you. Or Chat GPT would be like, well, the research on blah 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 blah. We have to separate creative versus educational. And so here's some examples of educational stuff you could do versus things that are creative, and they are separate. And so I had to acknowledge, like, okay, these things actually are separate. And so I had to give in a little bit and say, like, oh, yes, I can flex on that a little bit. And so we were able to come, to an agreement
Hmm.
on what the structure looked like. Whereas the conversation started as, you have too much screen time, that was just the line that I didn't want to cross
Yeah, for
the line.
sure. I just did the behavior training in a session with some parents, and video games came up. And from a behaviorist standpoint, I was like, well, so you're going to give it as a reward. They never get it unless they've done something to get it, right? Because that's just
Mhm,
how life works. We
mhm,
work, we get a paycheck. We do this, we get this, right? And for kids with real serious behavioral challenges, that's really key to set up so that they understand there's no free lunch, right? Um, and so we would what I was trying to explain was sort of the floor to time mentality, where it's like, well, so maybe the it doesn't just you do this, you get to sit in front of the video game by yourself because they're having behavioral challenges. So as you mentioned, they need attachment, they need connection.
mhm.
So maybe, I'll play, I remember wanting to poke my eyes out, but I would play Minecraft with Oliver. I'd go, okay, if
Yeah,
we can get through this, I'll play 20 minutes or 15 minutes of Minecraft with you. And then
right.
in behavior, that's called a paired reinforcer. So
Mhm.
basically, I'm sort of moving, you know, the reward just being the video game and having it be time with me,
Yeah,
starting out in his world, like floor time suggests, where we let them lead the interaction. And
right.
that happened to be what he was obsessed with at that time.
Yeah.
So is that what you're talking about? Like, does that sound on track from what you know developmentally?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like you're saying, it's about following their lead, and also I think what's been important for me is removing my own preconceived notions, because oftentimes our kids know a lot about what they're really into, so much at a deeper level, and we have a very surface idea of what that is. And if we can listen a little bit more deeply and go down the rabbit hole with them a little bit, we might end up finding out that, like, sometimes a video game is not just a video game. I mean, sometimes
Hmm.
they're doing some really complex critical thinking, abstract concepts. They're coding that, you like, Owen does stuff that I never even knew he knew how to do. But I can't just say, like, it's bad for you, because it's not. There's some really important skills that he's learning there, and it's silly for me to come in with my adult hat on and
Hmm.
just blanket statement that this thing is bad. First of all, because it disrupts our connection, right? It's important to him, and now I've just dismissed it, right? I'm not showing any interest in what he's passionate about, even if I think it's silly. And then if I actually sit and listen to it and understand it better, I realize that he's actually gaining some really important skills, and I can actually feed those skills. So if he's loving Minecraft, well, there's a whole Minecraft education program. So, like, I could teach him geography through Minecraft education. I can have him build a replica of the Eiffel Tower, right? And or maybe Pearl Harbor, right? We could talk about World War II. I mean, it's a lead into so many
Oh, that's awesome.
ideas, but
You're
it
so smart. I
requires,
love it.
oh, thank you. But it requires, like, pausing for a minute and putting your own stuff on hold. Um, and so I don't know. I just want to bring it back around for the parents, that to just offload the pressure. Like, it's just not that important, right? Like, not learning certain things is not going to hurt your kid for the rest of their life. It's just not. It's just not that important. If my kid was going to be, a surgeon, then yeah, maybe I might be pressuring them in a certain way a little bit more. I might have higher standards. But it's really hard. I know a lot of parents were raised with the idea of, like, this is what you do, and you get an education and then
Yeah.
you go to college, and it's very ingrained. That was how I was raised. I went to college, I went to UCLA, I got really high grades. But you know what? Doing that stuff, I know the things that I missed out on. I know what I had to give up for that. A lot of that was parental connection. A lot of that was joy and love and the feeling of security and being held and seen and known. I would give anything to have that, and to have critical thinking skills that I missed because I was so involved in just, like, rote memorization. I would love to give that kind of
Mhm.
knowledge up to have the other stuff,
Yeah,
because
it
I'm
is.
in therapy for the other stuff. I I can learn about World War II as an adult now, but I
Yeah.
but I can't get a secure attachment. So
Yeah, I know. It's so true. Oh my gosh. Yeah, and on the opposite end of the spectrum, as someone that struggled in school and then tried to finally figure out what I love, if somebody would have supported, the only good grade I ever got in school was creative writing. I got
Mhm.
an A every
Right,
time.
right,
But no one said to me, go be a writer.
right,
Like, you're excellent at this,
right.
right? And so I had to do all these other things. And I didn't have any support for the thing that well, it took me 20 years or 30 years to come back around to. And now I'm finally going to write something,
Yeah.
and publish it. But it's like the same with Anthony on the other end of the scale. He couldn't read. And so they wanted to stop teaching him to read, and because he's in special ed, and for kindergarten through third you learn to read, and then third on you read to learn, right? So third grade they're really stopping that reading curriculum. They're just now adding on things to read, right? And I was like, no, he's in school for 12 years, and this was special ed. They didn't want to do this anymore, and I was like, no, he's in school for 12 years. The average, a lot of the people in the country are on a third grade reading level,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
So if you can get him to a third grade reading level, can you do that in 12 years?
Right.
And they were like, well, yeah.
I hope so.
Okay, I don't care. I had him doing reading as a senior in high school. He was still doing his reading. They hated me for it in special ed because they just wanted to be done with that.
Yeah.
Some of it was kill and drill for him because of the way that he learns. Phonics didn't work, right? So he had to actually go
Mm,
old school and memorize words, and then we built books. out of
Mhm.
all the words that he had memorized. And every time he'd memorize new words, we'd add them into the books so he could learn context. And so
Okay.
that is how he learned to read, because
Yeah.
that's how he learned.
Yeah.
But now, he can read signs, he can read things where he goes,
Mhm.
but he uses his phone for everything. So when someone sends a text message or an email, he just hits a button and it reads it to him.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad I did that, but
Right.
not there were quite a few years where it caused a lot of anguish.
Yeah.
Caused a lot of anguish for him having to
Mm.
sit there and do that.
Yeah.
And it caused anguish for me and definitely the school.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and now looking back at it, yeah, he just uses assistive technology for
Yeah.
writing. He speaks in his phone and sends a text message, sends an email,
Right.
answers an email.
Right.
Now he's going to be able to use AI and
Yeah.
go, AI, compose an email telling these people this.
Right.
So, yeah, so it's really hard to be. So, again, we could go on forever. I think
Mhm.
we're close to our time, because I think I do want to stop, because I think I hear a whole nother podcast episode in this. We did go off a little course, but not, because these are all things that are really important about, I think, today's takeaway for me, and I want to hear yours, is just that maybe, think outside the box,
Think
and
outside the box.
it's okay, right? And that's what I heard you say over and over, is just
Yes.
stop the pressure,
Stop the pressure.
stop the
Yeah.
madness.
Stop the madness. Stop comparing yourself to everybody and think about what you want your kids' lives to look like. Like you want them to be good, kind, happy people. So you need connection, right? You need joy. You need some structure, maybe, and yes, we do want to have high expectations for our kids, but that doesn't mean that we have to stress them out so much that it's not fun anymore, right? Like learning should be joyful. And if your kids enjoy learning, if you can make it enjoyable in some sort of a way at whatever pace they need to go at, that love of learning doesn't ever go away. It just doesn't. So, whatever holes need to be filled later in life, if they love learning and if they know how to learn, they will find it.
Oh,
Or AI will find it for them. I mean, it just doesn't matter. They will figure it out. Just focus on the love of your kid. I mean, that's what really matters. That's what you're going to take with you for the rest of your life, is not did they learn X, Y, and Z. It was like, did my kid feel loved? Right?
yeah. And I love it, because they can't even say that you're woo woo, because you have such a great academic and educational background that there's no way. I know you are not woo woo.
Nobody better say I'm
So,
woo woo. I'm far
yeah,
from
no.
woo.
So to hear you talk about those core principles, as sophisticated and heady as you can be, it's there's research behind it. You know what I mean? Like, if we're not present and we're not engaged, I mean, then that leads back to mental health, right? Everything always seems to lead back to mental health, but I mean, it does. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for
I
having
really
me.
appreciate this. I think
So
this
fun.
was amazing. And everybody out there, thanks for tuning in to Talks Too Much. As you could see, now you know how the name of the podcast got
Yeah.
the name. But we're going to talk to another guest on education. This is going to be a 3-part series, and hopefully it'll help kick off the school year the right way. And this will be an ongoing conversation, because obviously this is an ongoing topic. So thank you, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again, Steph.
Thanks.
Thanks for being here with me on Talks Too Much. If today's episode helped you see things a little clearer, or you feel a little less alone, I'd love for you to share it with someone who needs it. And don't forget, have faith that struggles you're in will soon be your strength. I'll see you next time.